I start every ceremony with, my name's Hazel Jane and I'm an interfaith minister. And at the end, there'll always be someone that says, so you're a humanist.
Welcome to the Wedding Celebrant Show with me, Lisa Flant, an independent wedding celebrant living and working in the beautiful county of Cornwall. On the show, I'll be sharing insights, tips and a confession or two, as well as chatting to some amazing wedding professionals along the way. So if you're planning a wedding, or if you're a professional wedding celebrant, or perhaps you're just interested in some behind-the-scenes gossip, then this is the podcast for you. A quick recap if you didn't catch episode 3 of our show. I was chatting to the incredible individual that is Hazel Jane, who I met during our Celebrant training back in 2018. Now, Hazel is based in Glasgow, and this year she has conducted over 50 ceremonies in some of the most beautiful locations in Scotland. So we're jumping right back into our conversation, but if you want to catch up, remember to listen to episode 3. Okay, so let's bring this back to, we might have people listening who are thinking, I'm definitely going to do some training. You've convinced me I need to do some training rather than just set up tomorrow. What advice might you have for somebody who posed that question to you?
I think the most important thing is whether or not there's mentorship involved, which actually sounds like such a kind of cliche response, but that wasn't part of the training that we initially had. You know, we came, we had 2 days, and then we were kind of released out into the wild, which I'm imagining, if you want to continue the metaphor of just like animals from a zoo who have no wilderness experience at all, just like crumbling in the wild. So I think if you're looking, if being a celebrant, doing weddings, that's something that you really want to do. I've kind of said before to people, if you could find a celebrant that you were willing to just sort of give the equivalent amount of money to, and they could just give you their trade secrets and sit down with you and maybe bring you to a couple of their weddings, that is going to be so valuable to you, more so than kind of sitting in a classroom setting and kind of chatting about ceremonies. That's my perspective on it anyway. And I have been, again, lucky enough to have celebrant friends, and one in particular who really took me under her wing. She was sharing things with me. Every time I had a question or I was freaking out about something, she was right there on the other side of WhatsApp. She did this for free, but she knows how valuable she's been, and she does let me know regularly.
Oh,
that she helped me to fly, but she really did. And without her, I don't think I would be where I am today. Training is great. What do you need the training for? Do you need to know how to write? In which case I would do a creative writing course instead. Do you need to know how to speak publicly? In which case maybe a Toastmasters is a better fit. If it is about celebrancy, business and process and all those little tips and tricks, either a training that you know is going to give you all of that, or just a celebrant that's already doing it.
Do you know what? I think you're absolutely right. When I was thinking about this question, I genuinely think learning from professional celebrants is just crucial. Professional, experienced celebrants, because you do see relatively inexperienced celebrants set up courses and training, because it's a good way to make money, let's face it. But really, you need that intel from a practicing celebrant. And we did get that from our course. You know, our trainer was a really experienced celebrant. It's the only way you can see and check they're on top of their game. And if the last ceremony they delivered was 10 years ago, they're probably not that in touch. Interesting that we both think that way.
For me, the most delicious ceremony, and I love it when it happens, is when it actually does feel like a movie, because we've thought of everything and the bride or the groom or whoever is making an entrance can float on in and just experience it because they know that I've got them and that we've thought of everything together. But that doesn't happen if you're just like, all I know is how to write a ceremony and I've just showed up and I'm hoping for the best and I hope they've thought of it and they think I've thought of it. Oh my goodness, getting anxious just thinking about that.
You're making me anxious too. Okay. I am often contacted by new celebrants looking for a bit of support, some words of wisdom. And I often kind of just find myself saying, you just got to keep going, do the right things, put the time in, keep going. And harking back to something that we said earlier, finding yourself a buddy is brilliant. It doesn't have to be somebody you trained with, but that can help. But surrounding yourself with the right people, oh my gosh, it makes the journey so much easier and so much more fun. That's one of my little nuggets of wisdom. I bet you've got a couple up your sleeve.
There's a few celebrants that I have seen recently who are just doing phenomenally well. And it is not because they're just great celebrants, even though I'm sure they are. It's people who have so much personality that they're sharing that people really want to follow them and almost be their friend. And that's how they're getting their work. So it's not just about being a great celebrant. It's about showcasing who you are. Be yourself.
Be yourself. Be your authentic self.
Be your authentic self. And that's hard to do when you're also trying to sell yourself,
Absolutely. There's one other thing I just wanted to add to that, which is about knowing your worth. I think it's a little conversation I had with you back over lunch that time in Plymouth where you said you were charging very little. And I'm like, Hazel, know your worth. So I do see celebrants starting out charging maybe $350, $400. And if you are any good at your job and you want people to think you are good at your job, it's just not enough. It does not cover that preparation, that delivery, your training, your CPD, your insurance, your equipment, all those resources that you bring to every ceremony. And it doesn't cover your time or your commitment or your love or your passion. And I think it's kind of unhelpful to the wider celebrant community because it gives out the message that celebrants should be cheap, and they shouldn't be. However you approach it, I say know your worth. I say to other celebrants coming out, I say, your fee, it is just as valid, it's just as worthy as the money your couple will spend on their cake or the flowers. So if your prospective clients think you're too expensive, they're just not your clients.
I see celebrants in London charging £2,000 a ceremony. And of course, there's the London inflation that's always going to exist when you're looking at London. But I'm like, that's an extraordinary amount of money that is so different to what we're asked to charge or what we're kind of expected to charge in Scotland. And the ceiling is there for us. You really can't be pushing that too far. You will, I think, just lose a lot of your work after that. Maybe I'll give it a go and I can report back. I am glad to see that in general, celebrancy is being seen as something that is a bit more, I was going to say the word impressive. That's not really what I mean, but it is something that deserves to have money and time spent on it because it literally sets the tone of your day and it's your story. And to me, it's like the whole reason that everyone is there is to celebrate something. And here is the person leading that. I think that is worth something.
Absolutely. So agree with you there. Okay, you will know that we try and keep this podcast as real as possible. We try and take off those rose-tinted glasses sometimes. Could you share with us what you think some of the downsides to life as a busy celebrant are?
I do like to wear rose-tinted glasses as often as possible. So I do think, for the most part, it's awesome. A few things that had come into my mind about downsides. First of course, you're giving up lots of your weekends. So that's something you do have to decide. If you're open to that, you miss out on things. One of the things that often happens to me is there'll be a festival or a gig and it won't have announced its date, and then of course they'll announce it and I'll already be booked. So you do end up missing out on things. You can miss out on birthdays, and I've had lots of my friends get married on a really tight deadline. So I would have been booked for months and months before that. So that can be a downside. It can be quite tiring, creative writing all the time. And I think that's something that people don't necessarily talk about, not to blow my own trumpet, but I do write every single ceremony bespoke for each couple. And I want it to always be that way. It is an exercise in creative writing and it's so much fun to do, but it's not as simple as, okay, I just finished that ceremony, load up a new document, let's get the next ceremony started. Like once I've finished a ceremony, I need an afternoon to read through it a couple of times. I have to kind of just do a bit of admin to cleanse my palate before I can come back and start a new one. And I think that the nature of it is that there's always another ceremony to write. You actually never quite get that moment of satisfaction of like everything's done and I wrote the thing and now it's being, there's always the next one that's creeping around the corner. The blank page is beckoning to you. So I personally struggle with that a little bit. And the last thing I say is that not every ceremony feels delicious, and sometimes it's unexplainable. Sometimes I leave a ceremony and I can't think, nothing went wrong, nothing was bad about it, but I just won't have that feeling of elation. And then it eats me alive. And I think, what could I have done? And how could I have done better? And then, of course, if something does go wrong, as it does, we're all human and things happen and someone will drop something or, whatever it happens to be. And I really take that personally and I think about it constantly. So you do only get one crack at it and you do really want them to be perfect every single time, but they won't be. And you have to allow yourself the grace to move on from that. But that can be really tough. And I've definitely had ceremonies that I've thought about for days and weeks afterwards that I think I wish I'd done this, or I wish that hadn't happened. And, if I feel that way, how does the couple feel? So it can really, the pressure is there and it can kind of get to you. But I would be keen to know what your downsides are.
I think that feeling also at times of overwhelm, I find, and I think for various reasons, it can be down to social media. Those fellow celebrants, the people you're talking about, everyone's doing better than you, or they're busier than you, or their reviews are more amazing than yours. I think you can kind of feel stressed by that at times. And I try and be really measured about that. And I actually don't follow lots of celebrants for that reason. And I think it's also sometimes around your clients that, we're also keen to get our perfect clients, but sometimes they're not perfect, and it might be their deadlines, their timekeeping, paying you, that communications, we haven't written our vows and the wedding's tomorrow and we need you to help us. And you sometimes have those moments where you think, oh my gosh, this is tough and I'm struggling and why do I do this? I know you've already said that this is the best job in the world, but sometimes I say that and I also have to think, yeah, but it's got its foibles and it's got its irritations just like any other job, and I have to learn to accept that. Let's look at things that might frustrate you about being a celebrant. What makes you a bit mad, a bit angry, that might have you raging?
These are such specific things, but everyone assuming that I'm a humanist gets quite old, especially because I start every ceremony with, my name's Hazel Jane and I'm an interfaith minister, and at the end there'll always be someone that says, so you're a humanist? And I'm like, no, but thanks for listening. As I said earlier, people who are like, what a lovely little Saturday job, that I find incredibly frustrating. The actual work itself, I rarely find frustrating. There's certainly been little moments at weddings where other vendors have kind of done or said something. I'm trying to think of a good example. This is not a great example, but I did have a kind of coordinator once turn up my microphone without signaling to me that he was about to do that, and I was in the middle of chatting to the groom and I hadn't had the signal that the bride was about to come in. So there's a few moments that I can get in a bit of a flap, and I'm really relying on other people to potentially support me to do the best job I can possibly do. But those are very specific, tiny little things.
Something that's come up for me a lot this year, it won't have come up for you, is the number of people in the industry, and this is around education, who refer to non-legally binding celebrant ceremonies as sham weddings or fake weddings. And I am sure this has been fueled by Married at First Sight and Love is Blind and all those things. But in the last few months, I've had venues say it, I've had photographers say it, and I've had videographers say it. And they didn't just say it to me as a kind of cheeky fun aside. They said it in front of the couple on their big day. Moving on, I do think one of the amazing things about you, Hazel, is the way you've pivoted. You're not just a wedding celebrant. And I did mention this earlier, but of course, you really invested in your training to become an interfaith minister. And you really appreciated what that would bring to your business, that would bring to you as an individual. So could you tell us a bit more about that, why you did it, the impact it's had? Is it a route you'd recommend? Tell us your thoughts on that.
I trained to be an interfaith minister, admittedly in part because I did want to be able to do legally binding weddings. So that did play a role for me. But I was also really interested in faith more broadly and in really deepening my understanding and my practice. For me, as I say, like ceremony really is this incredible thing to me. And I sometimes say this at ceremonies, like it's the most beautiful thing about being human is to share in joy and celebration and connection. For just this little 30-minute period of time, we lose the rest of the world and we watch as people do this incredibly profound thing. So I wanted to show up to ceremonies knowing what that meant and knowing how to hopefully create that depth to it a little bit more. So I started the training in 2019. I did the kind of residential one. So I was in Ireland. It was in Northern. I was actually kind of just at the border. And it was me and like 30 Irish women and like 4 or 5 Scots and then this one English lady. And there was maybe like 3 men on the course, I think, which is quite normal and typical for these things. And it was quite a journey over 2 years. And it obviously started in 2019. I was ordained in 2021. There was a pandemic in the middle of that. Yeah. So that moved all of the training online, which was quite tricky. So I was ordained, for example, on Zoom, which I cannot recommend to you. If you imagine the gravitas and the power of ceremony, it just doesn't have it. To be ordaining yourself and be saying your vows to yourself in the middle of it's actually in this room that I'm sitting in right now. Certainly hasn't like stayed with me as a sort of profound moment. But yeah, it was very important to me to really feel that and to look into ceremony beyond just like writing a script. And I do think that is what our initial training was. It was how do you make a ceremony script? And even though I do use that word regularly when I'm working with couples, because it is ultimately a script, that is what we're creating, I didn't want it to feel like I just made a script. Like I just threw together a script, like here's your ceremony script. I wanted it to be like, no, I've made a ceremony with you. We've created something together. And the training was incredible for that, especially because we had these study groups and we did meet in person as often as we could. We had a little Scotland study group and we would all come together. And there were some incredible people in my study group. We would do ceremonies together. So we would literally sit around a table and we would conduct ceremonies for each other. And when you experience that in this like absolutely incredible way, I really felt like it opened up my mind to what we could be doing and how ceremonies can be written and the kinds of words and the kinds of actions, the simplicity and the magic of lighting a candle. So you move away from, we're going to do a unity candle ceremony. Isn't this lovely? You light a candle, you light a candle. We're going to light a candle together. Isn't that nice? To really being like, this act of lighting a candle means so much, and like the magic of watching a flame burn, and that's going to stand in the background of this entire ceremony, this light that is glowing around us. And it just totally changed the way that I kind of communicated things and felt about things. So it was a beautiful deep dive for me. I really enjoyed the training. I was really proud to be ordained in 2021, and there was lots and lots of homework and coursework, and we did spiritual counselling with each other, and we were spiritually counselled. So there was a lot of boxes to tick before we were able to be ordained, and it wasn't just a kind of couple of days and then you're done. So I really loved it. I don't instinctively recommend it to people who want to become celebrants because it's a huge commitment, and as I said, it's not solely based on celebrancy. That's not really its job. And I would even go as far as to say I had a lot to learn about celebrancy in terms of the more practical aspects of doing a really good wedding. But I did really enjoy it. More practically, like in terms of how I live now, I am really a wedding celebrant first and foremost, but I do funerals. I'm very, very passionate about that. I'm looking more into death care work, honouring people as they go through that kind of final transition, feeling like there's a real gap there when it comes to people who exist outside of organized religion, but who really do have faith and who feel like they're going on a spiritual journey or spiritual departure. That's something I'm really interested in and focusing on. So funerals are there. I've done a few baby namings, but weddings is kind of the majority of my work. That's where I'm still kind of resting myself for now.
What do you think kind of lies ahead for you now? I'm sure there's more out there for you, so tell me.
I'm putting together a kind of video course for people who have a loved one with a terminal diagnosis to just sort of support them from the practical side of things. So paperwork that needs to be done, that's things like wills, power of attorney, all the way through to how to spiritually kind of hold someone in that time, questions that you might want to ask them, very small, non-religious or not specific rituals that you can do with people. And that's really as simple as brushing someone's hair or swapping out an overhead light for a lamp or singing very gentle songs. Like these things that actually are very, very obvious, but when we are so lost because we don't have that spiritual guidance, we don't have that community that we used to have, it's not so obvious in that moment. That is really where my interest lies. And I find myself very passionate about what happens at the end of life, not just on a spiritual level of what happens when we die, but who is left behind, how do we support them, how do we make those rituals and those ceremonies incredibly profound and meaningful and healing, and not just, well, we have to have a funeral because that's the done thing, let's just try and get this over with because that's what's expected of us, and then we can go and fall apart once we shut the door behind us. Like, how do we actually bring community back? How do we actually support people to say goodbyes in a really meaningful way? So that's really my next kind of port of interest, and that's where I really want to lead myself, but I'm going there very, very gently. I'm super busy. I'm very blessed to be super busy. So I've got lots and lots of ceremonies really up until the end of the year. 2025 is already booking. So I'm kind of doing this as and when it feels appropriate. Otherwise I'll explode.
It sounds like incredible work, Hazel. I really do admire you for doing that.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are close to wrapping up our show, and we always do this with a bit of fun, and it's not necessarily related to being a celebrant, but we do have our quickfire questions that we ask everybody.
Bring it on.
You're ready, are you?
I think so.
Okay, well, some of these I can't wait to hear the answers to. So my first question to you, Hazel, is what's the craziest thing you've ever done?
I'm going to go with getting a neck tattoo at the age of 20. I think that's what everyone wants me to say, so I'm going to go for it. But the other craziest thing is moving to Glasgow, having never been here ever in my life, not having a job and not knowing anyone. That was pretty crazy.
Pretty crazy, pretty insane. But it's all worked out well, both the neck tattoo and the move.
No regrets. No regrets in any direction.
Cool. Do you have any claims to fame?
I thought about this and I don't think I do. I maybe somewhere, but I think I'm the youngest interfaith minister in the UK. I might not be, so I don't want to say that with absolute conviction, but I think I'm the youngest, or at least at some point I was.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool claim to fame.
Right?
Okay, dog or cat?
It's going to be cats for me.
Is it? You're a fellow cat person.
I do. They're very cute, and I don't have any affinity with dogs. Like, I like dogs, but I don't have I don't look into a dog's eyes and just think, I know what you're thinking. I don't. I very much don't. Same with horses. They scare me.
Okay, so cats all the way. Would you like to have a superhero power?
Yes, I would like to know everything, and I don't have that power. But I hate mysteries. I can't watch those unsolved mysteries on Netflix. I'm like, well, just tell me what happened. So I really would just love the power to be like, that's what happened. That's what's going on. I just need to know everything. That's my curse is the desire for that.
Are you an extrovert or an introvert?
I would say I'm an extrovert.
I would say you're an extrovert.
Yeah.
Again, it's all about the balance, and that's why we get on. Tell me 3 things on your bucket list.
Ooh, I'm going to do a little bit of celebrancy. I would love to do an international wedding. I'd love to do a wedding in Italy. I think that's like my number one, or one in France would also be great. Going with travel, I'd like to travel to Asia. I've never been to Asia, which kind of feels crazy because I love to travel. And I don't know about a third one. I know how dreadful is that? I think maybe I'd like, this isn't really a bucket list thing, but I would really like to learn to cook. I'm not a great cook, and I think that's something that I could get into. So we'll go with that. It's not very buckety, is it? Bucket list is meant to be really exciting. Just say skydiving for the sake of it. It's way more interesting than
I think you have to be careful what you wish for. Tell me one thing that instantly makes your day better.
Watching my daughter laugh hysterically at something, that will always make my day brighter and happier.
Wonderful. Mm-hmm. And can you share with me your favourite place in Scotland?
Actually, my favourite place in Scotland is Edinburgh during the Fringe Festival. There is no greater place in the world as far as I'm concerned. It's glorious, it's everything, it's joy, it's happiness, it's Edinburgh, it's the Fringe Festival.
And what are you most proud of?
I am most proud of this year of my working life. 2024 has been by far the busiest year for me as a celebrant. I've had incredible couples. I've had amazing ceremonies. I feel like I've found my stride with it. And I've just had the absolute best time. I've had a real ball. So I'm really proud of getting my work to this place, because it wasn't that many years ago that I did 4 weddings in a year, and I thought I'll never make this work. So I'm really, really proud to be here doing what I love, and being busy with it.
Fantastic. And finally, describe your perfect day off.
You know, this is very tricky as a fairly new parent, because I was like, I feel like I definitely have to mention spending time with my daughter, which I do love. But if we're talking a day off, I'm thinking massage. I'm thinking a really nice dinner somewhere. I'm thinking maybe even going to a gig. These are all things that bring me a huge amount of joy. But also like seeing Ottilie, that's my daughter, seeing her play with other kids, seeing her enjoy the world. I think that is a gorgeous way, but it's not very relaxing. So there's a slight balance to be struck there.
Yeah, perfect isn't always relaxing. I want to thank you so much, Hazel. It has been so wonderful having you as our guest. Thank you so much for all your insights, all your words of wisdom. We wish you every success with your business.
Oh, why, thank you.
I know you're going to be even more successful than you are already. So a big thank you from us, and bye-bye for now.
Confessions of a Registrar.
As regular listeners will know, before I trained to become an independent wedding celebrant, I was a deputy registrar and a ceremony officer at my local authority, and I saw a lot of weddings which didn't go exactly to plan. Today, I'm thinking back to pens, or to be specific, the pen and ink you use to sign your legal paperwork with. Oh, how I hated that ink. One of the first jobs on arriving at the register office on a busy day of weddings was to fill up the special pen with the special but indelible ink. And to be fair, these pens, they were pretty cheap. And more often than not, the ink would end up going everywhere, and I would have blue fingers for the rest of the day, if not several days. But that's not my confession. One day, I was at a rather plush venue for a lovely family wedding with my fellow registrar, and the parents of the bride approached us and they said, "We would love it, if at all possible, that the paperwork could be signed with this pen." And they presented us with the most gorgeous fountain pen, and they said, It's been in the family for well over 100 years, and all of our important legal documents have been signed with it. And we really appreciate that you need to use the special ink, and we'd be so happy to put some of that into our pen. But it would mean so much to us if we could use this pen. Unfortunately for the family, I was working with a particularly officious lead registrar that day. In fact, she'd already complained to the venue about the paintings of the cherubs in the ceremony room being overly religious for a civil ceremony. So sadly, but rather unsurprisingly, the answer was a tight-lipped no, which was just one other reason to hand in my notice and train as a celebrant. Coming up next time on the Wedding Celebrant Show, we will be talking to the awesome human being that is Mr. Noah Worth, a photographer and videographer extraordinaire who many of our couples and ourselves have been super lucky to work with and who we have known since he was a wee boy, and will be lifting the lid on the world of wedding photography. Until then, bye for now. That wraps it up for this episode. Thanks so much for listening to the Wedding Celebrant Show, brought to you by the team at Celebrant in Cornwall.